She's been on the Today Show, Good Morning America. She's got 2 ebooks. Don't worry, I'll put the links with the show notes. But let's go ahead and get started with our conversation with Jillian Benfield. Welcome to the Special Education Inner Circle podcast. I'm your host, Catherine, and Jillian, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is such a treat.
It's going to be an exciting conversation, but we always start out with the first question of how did you end up at an IEP table?
So can I give you a long answer?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. So my background is a little bit like your beginnings where, well, first I was a journalist. I was a news anchor and reporter. And then my husband was in dental school, and then he decided to pay for dental school using an Air Force scholarship. So I took the year off of news. We moved across the country from Georgia to Las Vegas. And then I thought, since that was just a 1-year assignment, that I would go back to news once that assignment was done. And then we got stationed in Alamogordo, New Mexico, which there is not even a Target there, let alone a TV news station. So I tell you all of that because 8 days after we arrived in New Mexico, that's when we found out that our unborn son likely had Down syndrome. And so eventually that's how I ended up at an IEP meeting, is that son did have Down syndrome. And he is now 6.5 years old. And so we've been through, I don't know, is that like 4 IEPs so far?
A lot.
Something like that.
So I was gonna say, so you're a mom of Anderson who has Down syndrome. You also have other children, correct? Let's include them in there.
Yes, I have an 8-year-old girl, Violet, and I have a 4-year-old son, Preston.
All right. So you're a busy mom. And I share that because a lot of our listeners, they're moms, they're busy teachers. And as we get into this conversation, I want them to know, like, you get them, you get the perspective.
Yeah. Busy's my middle name. I mean, especially right now, as I told you, we're in the process of a move, and it's nutty over here. And this is just how we've been rolling the last several years. So yeah.
So one of the reasons that I reached out to you and I said, hey, will you come talk with us, is because you have a great way with words and sharing emotions that happen as a parent, as you're going through a lot of different things, whether it's IEP meetings or it's doctor's appointments, or it's just life and moving and all of that. And there's a lot of mixed emotions that come with being a parent of a child with Down syndrome. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And I'd love for you to share just some encouragement. Let's just start there. Usually I do encouragement at the end of the episodes, but I'm like, no, we're going to start with encouragement. So can you give some encouragement to some parents who are listening, who are feeling quite hopeless just with everything that has happened in the world and the decisions and the things that they're going through also?
Yeah. So I think a tool that I learned from a friend who was in therapy, I got like bonus therapy through her therapist, was the power of the word and. I think that I used to be a but user. It was like, having a child with Down syndrome is really hard, but it's also the best thing that's ever happened to me, right? And when you use that but word, it kind of cancels out the first part of that sentence. It cancels out the difficult pieces that come with parenting a child with a disability. And so what I like to tell my followers is, it's not a but thing, it's a both and thing. Parenting a child with a disability is the hardest thing that I've ever done. And it is also the greatest joy of my life. Both of those things are true. I think that sometimes we think that, I feel like just with how divided we are as a country and polarized everything is, it's like one or the other, pick a team. No, like I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell the truth because both of these things are true. And so when it comes to the encouragement piece to other parents of kids with disabilities, I always just say, like, it's okay to say that this is hard because it's hard. It's hard parenting a child in a world that is not accommodating to them. It's hard.
Yes.
And it is also, nothing's ever taught me more in my life. Nothing has ever been more rewarding. Both of those things are true.
I'm listening to you and I'm like, okay, teachers who are listening right now, listen to that switch of the language. Because when you're doing parent teacher conferences or you're at the IEP meeting, you could switch your buts into ands and change the entire feel of an IEP meeting. That would be so big. So yeah, I love that piece. This is actually leading great into the conversation. You and I talked a little bit before this because it is a sensitive topic, and it's something that needs to be talked about when we talk about inclusion. And I know that you're a big advocate for inclusion, and you're working through a lot of barriers that are in the community, that are in the schools, to do that. A lot of times when we hear the word inclusion or inclusion advocate, we think that we picture a parent who is thinking everything has to be in general education when it comes to school, or everything has to be exactly the same, and that there's no leeway in that. And you just said, there's a but and then there's an and kind of thing. And I know we kind of chatted about your view on inclusion, how there can be a bit of an and. There can be inclusion and perhaps some other things. Can you explain your viewpoint on that?
Yeah. So for me, for what I have experienced with Anderson so far, I am okay with, I want him in the general education classroom a minimum of 80% of the day. That to me is inclusion. However, I am okay with some specialized instruction. So right now he gets pulled out for speech because it's really hard to work on articulation around 20 of your other classmates. That's not fun. So that to me, just, it makes sense for him to be pulled out for that. The school that he's at right now, currently all students have to learn Chinese. Well, I just don't think that's appropriate for him, because we're working very hard on the English language right now, and I don't want him to be confused. So during that time, he gets some more specialized math and reading instruction. So it's not like for me, it's not a end all be all. No, nothing can be done outside the general education classroom. However, I do think that everything that can be brought into the classroom should, because I'm not raising him to live in a segregated world. That's not the world we live in. I'm raising him to live in an integrated world with everybody. And the best experience he's going to get with that is in the general education classroom.
Do you have any specific examples that you would, as specific as possible with keeping all the confidentiality that we keep in special education, of maybe some things that you had to work through? And you can even think back to like maybe early intervention, kind of, coming into the school system. What's some of the pushback that you might have gotten that you were able to work through?
I would say the most pushback I have gotten from a school, this is when we were in Texas, we're currently in Colorado. And he had a pretty good preschool experience that was in a fully included classroom. He was only pulled for speech. But when he was leaving preschool and entering kindergarten, basically the school had set up a system, which was not in writing or anything, but they had started something new. And I saw it happening in action. I was there for a parent teacher conference, and I noticed that all of these kindergartners came into the preschool classroom while the preschoolers were gone. And what they were doing was they were basically putting these kindergartners with disabilities in an inclusive classroom for half or more of that than of their day. And then they were being segregated the rest of the day. And they basically were doing this test trial period without putting it in writing. If they did well during this kind of phase in kindergarten in inclusion, then they would go on to be in an inclusive environment in first grade. If they didn't, then they would go into a segregated environment in first grade. This resulted in a 5.5-hour IEP meeting, because they were planning on doing this with Anderson. I was like, no, in no way is this individualized. This is a system that you've developed that is quite frankly unlawful. So that's the biggest pushback we've ever gotten. I was very thankful for my advocacy training that I've done. I'm not a certified advocate, but the different advocacy courses like Partners in Policy Making and Rights Law and on all of those that I had done, because I just knew what they were doing was not legal and not researched. They had no data to do this. So
and the families didn't know what was going on.
They didn't know. They did not know.
Yeah, we have to be transparent. People wonder how come there's a lack of trust in our special education world. And it's because there's not a whole lot of transparency. I have hope for this next generation of teachers and that are questioning a lot of things, and good for them, but they're hitting the same barriers. Like they're questioning things and then they're like, oh, wait, but I need my paycheck. And, they're not wrong. They do. They need their paycheck and we need them showing up to do that. But anytime you question something, there's pushback on both sides. That's
100%. And let me tell you, the reason that I figured that out, like I said, I was in there for a parent teacher conference and I kind of saw what was happening. But the teacher, who was a young teacher, it was her first year of teaching, who had just done all of this excellent training at her university on inclusive education, gave me a heads up. And guess what? Like if she hadn't, I think I would have been very blindsided, and she ended up leaving that school. And that's sad that she felt like she had to leave that school because she couldn't deal with that unlawful and unjust system.
Yes. And there's so many teachers right now nodding their heads like, yep, been there, done that, might have just left a school or they're considering leaving a school because of just practices that they're just not right. Like whether they're lawful, unlawful, that like, it's just not right. To judge a child in that way and to not individualize. So let's talk a little bit about, you have a book that talks about faith, and you have some support for parents in that way. And this is a conversation we don't talk a whole lot about on here. We don't talk about faith. We don't talk about God in that way. But when I see some of your posts, I'm like, yes. So having a brother with Down syndrome and growing up, believing in God, going to a church for my own religious education, I grew up Catholic. With that, seeing my brother segregated in the church and it not being accessible, and then them only having special needs programs, like there's no inclusion in other things. I think that's a lot of experiences that's happening in the world still. Like when I talk to families, and then I, hop on Facebook and I see your post, and you've got, some things where like you have this faith and you have these things. And I feel like a lot of times our families with disabilities want to lean on faith, or they want to believe and they want to dig in, but they don't have that community piece. So can you just tell us a little bit about your book? I'll have the link here for everybody there. And just how do you stay leaning into your faith when, it's not always the easiest thing to do?
Okay, so the book that I am currently writing, that's going to be published in 2023, is mostly, it's about how our unexpected circumstances can really help us become who God desires us to become, right? I think we are known and loved for who we are. There's nothing that we have. Anderson has taught me this a lot. There's nothing that we can do to earn our worth. It's already just settled from the beginning. In the beginning, God said it was very good, and we're a part of that, right? But we were also all put here to grow. We're loved as we are. It's a paradox. We're loved as we are, but we're meant to grow. We're meant to become somebody, the highest version of ourselves. Let's put it that way. And I think that our unexpected circumstances can really help us live into our God-dreamed entirety. And that is a message that I want parents who follow me to know, that these adversities that I see Anderson experience, and then these adversities that I experienced being his mother, trying to fight for equity for him and others like him. Is it fair? No. But it is helping me become who I believe God always dreamed that I would be. And I think that our unexpected circumstances for all of us can do that as well. So that's my main messaging when it comes to faith and unexpected is there's hope in our unexpected experiences. And that hope is not always that our circumstances are going to change, but that there can be change, and that oftentimes that change is from within.
I love that. It's so much bigger than an IEP meeting, right? When we're looking at what are we doing and why are we doing this? It's bigger than an IEP meeting. It's bigger than, the 12 or 15 years that we spend in school. It's bigger than that. And I feel like I have a perspective of that now, having a brother who's 44, with Down syndrome, and he's living in Florida doing his thing with my mom, and they're not in a segregated community. He lives with my mom and they're integrated into a 55 and over community. He can't wait to get his golf car and drive around with all, my mom's going to drive their dog and drive around the community and be part of that community and have this meaningful life. And I think that's so important. If you could give teachers some words of advice, some words of just kind of insight of some things that they either should or should not say to parents who are coming to the IEP. It could be seasoned parents, it could be new parents. I'm not gonna put a specific situation in there, but do you have some words of wisdom for teachers of things that maybe you heard that you were like, oh, I'm so happy the teacher told me that? Or sometimes, we hear a sentence and it's kind of like a dagger and we don't forget those. So do you have some words for them?
I'm trying to really think. Anderson has only had one not so great teacher, and she ended up quitting like 6 months after starting. So we've really been very fortunate with teachers. I think I don't know if I have things not to say other than just assuming. I do feel like I've heard, not necessarily from teachers, but from just professionals that have worked with my child, whether it's a paraprofessional, maybe a teacher, a therapist or something, but just like working off of like a deficit model. Well, he can't do this. He can't, instead of like, he's really good at this and he really needs help with this. That's just such a better way to communicate with the parent. First of all, I had a friend yesterday. I went to her house and she was like, this new therapist just told me she's not doing this, she's not doing this, and asking all of these like really negatively focused questions instead of like focusing on what she is really thriving and excelling at. So I think just looking at the whole child and just knowing that they're a human being first. And what do we all want as human beings? We want to belong. That's what we want. And my child should walk into school every day knowing that they belong. They belong with everybody else. And so if I had any advice for teachers, it's just to keep that in mind. This is a child that belongs because they are here and they're human.
Absolutely. We say that all the time in our master IEP coach community. When I teach the module to new master IEP coaches about inclusion, I say inclusion is an experience, not a place. And a child should feel included from the time they step onto campus to the time they get back home. That's a place where they belong. They're a part of that, whether it's walking down the hallway, it's the playground, or again, it's just, coming off that bus in the morning and just being part of that school community is so very important. All right. So is there anything else that you want to make sure that parents know about the IEP process? If you were just like, if I could tell every parent one thing, I would tell them this.
Oh, I have so many things. I would say, I am going to give you a couple things. I would say that you lead the meeting. I did not lead the first 2 meetings, and now I do. Now I kind of have like a little speech that I give at the beginning of the meeting. I have like pictures of Anderson and just kind of talk about little things that he's done over the last year, and just kind of try to paint a picture for who he is outside of school. And I always read our vision statement with that. And I always I always bring up the statistic, if you've heard another podcast, or it's a quote, I'm sorry, from Dr. Eric Carter.
Go
And
for it.
yeah, and it's about how early segregation does not, oh gosh, I'm going to mess this up now, but it's about how early segregation doesn't merely predict later segregation. It almost it all but ensures it. It's something like that. And that we're looking for an integrated life for Anderson. And it relates back to our mission statement. We want him to have an integrated life. We want him to have a life of choice. And that means like a fully inclusive education where he learns how to be a human in this human world, right? So we always start off with that. And then just one more thing that I did not learn about until later that I feel like has made a huge difference is doing that parent concerns letter and sending it to your teacher, special education coordinator, whoever, and telling them to put it in the IEP. I feel like that changed a lot of things for us when we were in that not so great situation in Texas. And it's been discussed a lot here in Colorado as well. And I just feel like it's a powerful piece that not a lot of parents necessarily know to do.
Absolutely. So I'm going to give a shout out again to the Master IEP Coach Mentorship and just let you guys know that if you're like, what is this parent input statement, this parent concerns, parent vision, all of those things, that's a huge piece of our training. Also, that's something that I've been doing for over 20 years in education, both when I was a teacher in the classroom and then working with parents and teachers in schools. That's what puts the truly individualized piece into the IEP. So there's 99 things that we could choose to work on in the IEP, but that will bring us in all different directions. We need the parent's vision. We need this parent concerns. We need to know what is happening outside of school and what that long-term thought is to really put us on the path for success. And we do a reminder all the time. I'm going to give a shout out just for those of you, I haven't said it the last couple of times on the podcast, that the entire purpose of an IEP is not just to provide a free and appropriate public education, but it's to meet a child's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And those three categories are so important, and those can be worked right into your concerns, right into your parent vision statement. So on that note, again, everybody, just, there are going to be links wherever you're listening to this or watching this, above, below, in the show notes, all the places. Make sure you connect and follow with Jillian. And, you are truly just a light on social media. There is so much darkness. There's so much division. There's so much chaos. And just thank you for being you and who you are in our disability community and bringing this leadership and hope to everyone.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate what you're doing and educating teachers and parents alike and bringing us together and, getting us on the same team instead of separate teams. And I just appreciate what you do too. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you next time on the Special Education Inner Circle podcast.